a day forever etched in memory as Black Tuesday. The stock market, a symbol of prosperity, dramatically collapsed. The initial reaction to the market's crash was shock and disbelief. Within hours, billions of dollars vanished from the U.S. economy. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged by 12%. Panic spread rapidly through Wall Street. Investors desperately tried to sell, but no buyers were found. Suddenly, they realized their entire model was fundamentally flawed. By mid-November, the market had lost almost $30 billion. This was more than the entire U.S. government's yearly budget. The Dow had dropped nearly half its value from earlier highs. Financiers attempted to restore stability. Figures like J.P. Morgan Jr. and other wealthy individuals pooled millions. However, it was ultimately too late. The devastating damage had already been inflicted. The underlying causes of disaster had been brewing long before. Homelessness, poverty, and unemployment became widespread struggles. The 1920s were called the Roaring Twenties, full of jazz and booming business. Yet, beneath the surface, the U.S. economy was quite unstable. Banks operated with little oversight, issuing loans carelessly. Stock market activity was fueled by speculation. Many bought on margin. They borrowed as much as 90% of the stock's purchase price. Meanwhile, wealth inequality significantly widened. The wealthiest 1% held more riches than the bottom 42% combined. Their tactic was to inflate a stock's price artificially. They'd buy it themselves, then sell it off to the public. Factories were producing more items than consumers could afford to buy. Farmers were already struggling after World War I. Debt accumulated across rural parts of America. When the market finally crashed, the entire economic system collapsed with it. By 1933, the economy had reached its absolute lowest point. Unemployment dramatically rose to 25%. Around 15 million Americans were jobless. 9 banks failed, wiping out savings, and homelessness surged. Families resided in cars, makeshift huts, or vast shantytowns called Hoovervilles. These were bitterly named after President Herbert Hoover, whom many blamed. As people lost their homes, they sought shelter wherever possible. They assembled huts from scavenged cardboard, tin, and various materials. Some slept in Central Park caves. Men who once held office jobs lined up for free meals. Children left school to help families. Suicides sharply increased. In 1932 alone, over 23,000 Americans ended their lives, the highest recorded number at that time. Farmers suffered immensely. Extreme farming practices combined with drought turned the Great Plains into a barren, unproductive land. The Dust Bowl forced hundreds of thousands of families from states like Oklahoma and Texas. They became migrants known as Okies, heading to California seeking scarce work. Amidst the hardship, the federal government seemed ineffective. President Hoover championed rugged individualism, the belief that citizens should overcome challenges independently. But as banks failed and hunger grew, public frustration mounted. Protest movements began to emerge. In 1932, thousands of World War I veterans, called the Bonus Army, marched to Washington demanding early payment of their bonuses. These bonuses were initially promised for 1945. Hoover felt some sympathy for them as individuals. However, he deemed their request financially irresponsible and unsound. He also believed they needed to be removed from the buildings they were occupying in Washington, D.C. Hoover then ordered the U.S. Army to force them out. Under General Douglas MacArthur's command, Soldiers used bayonets and tear gas on the veterans' camps. This event shocked the country and sealed Hoover's political downfall. With trust in the economic system gone, crime and corruption flourished. Notorious gangsters like Al Capone and John Dillinger thrived, sometimes even admired by the public. Desperate people considered radical ideologies. Some were drawn to communism, others envisioned revolution. In the 1932 election, Americans clearly desired change, and they received it. Franklin D. Roosevelt, a Democrat and former governor of New York, secured a decisive victory. He pledged a New Deal for the citizens of America. And believe me, my friends, it was a true landslide this time. On March 4, 1933, Roosevelt delivered his initial inaugural address. "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." This statement was more than just words. FDR immediately began implementing his plans. Within his first 100 days, Roosevelt passed significant new legislation. His main objectives were relief, recovery, and reform. Key New Deal initiatives included the Emergency Banking Act, reopening solvent banks and rebuilding confidence, and the Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, which hired young men for conservation projects. The Works Progress Administration, WPA, created employment for various professionals, building vital infrastructure like roads and schools. The Social Security Act of 1935 introduced unemployment benefits and pensions for seniors. The Securities and Exchange Commission was established to regulate Wall Street and prevent future collapses. Millions gained employment through these government programs. Farmers received subsidies to support their incomes. Labor unions grew stronger and child labor was reduced. However, FDR's New Deal faced considerable opposition. The U.S. national debt climbed from $20 billion to $33.7 billion between 1933 and 1936. This represented about 40% of the U.S. GDP at that period. Business leaders accused him of promoting socialism. The Supreme Court invalidated several of his initial laws. Even within his own party, Roosevelt encountered resistance. Yet he persevered, winning 4 presidential terms, a record unmatched before or since. Not everyone experienced the benefits of the New Deal equally. African Americans often received less assistance or were excluded from job opportunities. Women faced challenges finding work in fields dominated by men. In the southern states, racial discrimination remained deeply ingrained. New Deal programs like the CCC frequently operated with segregation. Labor disputes escalated. In 1937, a strike at Republic Steel turned violent when police fired on unarmed workers, resulting in 10 deaths during the Memorial Day massacre. Conflicts between labor groups and companies intensified as the struggle for employees' rights grew stronger.
Widespread corruption unfortunately persisted.
Some initiatives from the New Deal were marred by excessive spending and unfair preferential treatment. However, despite these imperfections, the New Deal reignited optimism. By the late 1930s, economic hardship had lessened, though complete revival was still out of reach. Then, a worldwide turmoil emerged that would alter everything. The Second World War. When Germany advanced into Poland in 1939, the United States maintained its neutral stance. But by 1941, America was accelerating its weapon manufacturing, delivering provisions to Great Britain and France via the Lend-Lease Act. Following Japan's assault on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, The United States joined the conflict, and the economy radically changed overnight. Military manufacturing surged during World War II. 300,000 airplanes were produced, 102,000 tanks, almost 12 million firearms, numerous uniforms were required, and over 1,200 significant naval vessels were all constructed to back the wartime operations. Manufacturing plants operated around the clock. Throughout World War II, joblessness fell to a mere 1.2%. Women joined the workforce in huge quantities, famously represented by Rosie the Riveter. The national mobilization united the country, and with it, the Great Depression finally concluded. The period of the Great Depression significantly altered how the federal government influenced citizens' lives. It prompted the establishment of Social Security, financial system oversight, and worker safeguards. It served as a stark reminder that excessive avarice and disparity can ruin even the most robust economy. Countless individuals endured hardship. Yet, the fortitude of ordinary Americans, from factory hands to farmers, homemakers to immigrants, aided in reconstructing a devastated nation. And thanks to leaders such as Franklin D. Roosevelt, the U.S. emerged not only from economic hardship but also from a decade that nearly destroyed the American ideal.